For 30 years, the brutal murders of Sarah and Michael Linden remained a cold case, a haunting mystery that tormented their daughter, Emma, the only surviving witness. The investigation stalled for decades until a revolutionary DNA technique identified a single hair from the crime scene, pointing detectives toward a shocking suspect, David Miller, a respected pillar of the community and a man everyone thought they knew. This is the story of how a genetic breakthrough exposed a killer hiding in plain sight, proving that the greatest evil often wears the most familiar face. The autumn of 1992 in Oakwood Falls was supposed to be peaceful. The trees lining Elm Street were turning fiery shades of orange and red, and there was a crispness in the air that promised quiet evenings. The Linden family, Sarah, Michael, and their 16-year-old daughter Emma were the picture of suburban normality. Their home, a neat two-story with a well-kept garden, was a testament to their quiet, happy life. But on the morning of October 17th, that picture shattered. The first officer on the scene described an eerie silence. The front door was unlocked, slightly ajar, swaying in the gentle breeze. Inside, the house was almost perfectly orderly, which made the violence discovered in the master bedroom so much more disturbing. There were no overturned chairs, no ransacked drawers. It was this unsettling normality that initially confused the investigation. Sarah and Michael Linden had been attacked with a brutal, overwhelming force, but the rest of the house stood pristine, a silent witness to a crime that seemed to have no reason. The only sign of a struggle was confined to the bedroom, and it was there that a single, crucial piece of evidence was found, clutched tightly in Sarah Linden's hand, as if it were her final desperate act, was a single strand of dark hair. It did not belong to her, to Michael, or to Emma. It was a foreign object, a tiny thread left behind by the killer. The forensic team treated it like gold, carefully bagging it as the one tangible lead in a case shrouded in mystery. But in 1992, DNA technology was in its infancy. They could determine basic blood types from evidence, but creating a unique genetic profile from a hair follicle was a complex, uncertain process that yielded little more than a vague promise for the future. The other haunting mystery was Emma. The teenager was not in the house. A frantic search ended hours later when a truck driver found her over 10 miles away, stumbling along the shoulder of a rural highway. She was disoriented, her clothes muddy, her eyes wide with a shock so profound she could barely speak. When she could, her story was fragmented and terrifying. She recalled waking to noises, a sense of panic, and then being inside a moving vehicle. She remembered the dark interior of a car and the silhouette of the driver, but no clear face, no distinguishing features. She believed she had jumped from the car and run blindly into the night. Her survival was a miracle, but her memory was a locked box. The official theory painted a picture of a botched burglary or a random, violent intruder who had taken Emma for reasons unknown, only for her to escape. But the lack of a motive and the strange, focused nature of the crime left a persistent, nagging doubt in the minds of the seasoned investigators. The case, despite the hair evidence and the survivor's testimony, began to grow cold, frozen, not by a lack of clues, but by a lack of context. A story that refused to make sense. The years following the Linden murders were a slow, painful erosion of hope for the town of Oakwood Falls. The case file, once thick with urgent reports and fresh leads, was eventually moved to a storage room. The detectives who had lived and breathed the investigation retired one by one, carrying the weight of the unsolved case with them into their quiet lives. The community tried to move on, but the shadow of that night never fully lifted. The Linden house, now owned by another family, stood as a silent monument to the tragedy, its cheerful new paint unable to completely unguy the memories. Emma Linden became the living, breathing heart of the mystery. Orphaned and traumatized, she was raised by an aunt in a neighboring state. She grew from a shell-shocked girl into a quiet, determined woman. The fragmented memories of that night were like pieces of a nightmare she could never fully assemble. She became a therapist specializing in trauma. A choice everyone understood was her way of seeking answers not just for herself, but for others trapped by their past. She never gave up on the case, periodically calling the Oakwood Falls Police Department, her voice a familiar, sorrowful reminder of their greatest failure. Each call was met with the same apologetic tone. There had been no new developments, the world had moved on. Inside the police department, the evidence from the Linden case was a ghost that wouldn't rest. The single hair, carefully preserved in its evidence bag, seemed to taunt them from the vault. For years it was useless. Traditional DNA analysis required a root bulb, which this hair lacked. It was a dead end. Then, around 2010, a scientific revolution began to ripple through cold case units across the country. Forensic scientists developed a technique called mtDNA, or mitochondrial DNA testing, which could extract a unique profile from the shaft of a hair. It was a long shot and expensive, but the new chief, who had been a young officer on the periphery of the original investigation, approved the funding. The hair was sent to a private lab specializing in degraded evidence. For months, there was silence. Then, a report arrived. They had successfully sequenced a DNA profile from the hair. It was a monumental achievement, but it led to another dead end. When the profile was run through the National Criminal Database, there were no matches. The killer had no prior felony convictions. The brief flare of hope died down again. The DNA profile was just another piece of information without a context, a name without a face. It was filed away, a modern solution that had, for the moment, failed to bridge the gap to a crime committed in a different era. The case was cold once more, now with a genetic signature attached to its mystery, waiting for the next, even bigger breakthrough. The Linden case file might have remained closed for good, if not for a quiet revolution happening in a California courtroom. In 2018, the arrest of the Golden State Killer using a novel technique called genetic genealogy sent shockwaves through the law enforcement world. Detectives in Oakwood Falls watched the news with a growing sense of possibility. The method was simple in concept but complex in execution. Upload an unknown DNA profile to a public genealogy website, find distant relatives of the suspect, and use their public family trees to build a path back to one individual. It was a controversial step. The ethics of using commercial databases designed for people seeking their ancestry for police work sparked intense debate. The department held meetings, weighing the privacy concerns against the desperate need for justice for Emma Linden. Ultimately, they decided to proceed, working with a retired FBI agent who had become an expert in this new field. The DNA profile from the hair was uploaded to the largest genealogy database under an anonymous pseudonym. The wait for matches began. Weeks later, a list arrived. It contained over 1,000 usernames, fourth, fifth, and sixth cousins of their unknown suspect. It was an ocean of data. The genealogists started the painstaking work of building a reverse family tree. It was like assembling a massive jigsaw puzzle without knowing what the final picture should look. She looked for shared surnames, common geographical locations, any thread that could connect these disparate people. Months of dead ends and frustrating overlaps followed. The tree sprawled across the screen, a tangled web of connections that seemed to lead everywhere and nowhere. Then a pattern emerged. A cluster of these distant cousins, previously unconnected, all shared a common ancestral couple who had settled in the very state where Oakwood Falls was located. The genealogist focused her efforts, branching the tree, forward through generations, moving closer to the present day. The possible identities of the suspect narrowed from thousands to hundreds to a few dozen. The tree finally pointed to a single family name that was deeply rooted in Oakwood Falls history: Miller. The investigation, dormant for so long, snapped back to life with electric intensity. There were two Miller brothers of the right age, David and Robert. Robert was the obvious suspect. He had a history of minor arrests, had drifted through various manual jobs, and was known to have a volatile temper. He fit the classic profile of a perpetrator. David, on the other hand, was a respected local businessman, a family man, a fixture at community events. The idea of him being involved seemed ludicrous. Following the path of least resistance, detectives focused on Robert first. They surveilled him and collected a DNA sample from a cigarette butt he discarded outside a convenience store. The lab work was rushed. When the results came back, the investigative team was stunned into silence. Robert Miller was excluded. His DNA was not a match. The obvious suspect was cleared, and the case was thrown into chaos. With no other options, and with great reluctance, they turned their attention to the pillar of the community, David Miller. The surveillance of David Miller was conducted with the utmost discretion. The idea of him as a suspect felt so wrong that detectives half expected their equipment to malfunction. They watched him go about his life, a man deeply woven into the fabric of the town. He presided over meetings at his small, successful construction firm, where he was known for his fairness and integrity. They watched him laugh with clients, his smile easy and genuine. He coached a youth baseball team, patiently teaching teenagers how to grip a bat, his encouragement firm but kind. He was a fixture at town fundraisers, always the first to write a check for a good cause. To the officers watching him, he appeared to be the exact opposite of a monster. He was the man every community hopes to have. This public persona made the private act of collecting his DNA feel like a profound violation. They couldn't risk asking him directly, so they waited for him to discard something with his genetic material. The opportunity came at a local diner where he ate a solitary breakfast every Tuesday. After he left, a plainclothes officer entered and secured the napkin he had used, along with a water glass. The items were rushed to the state lab. The wait for results was agonizing, filled with a tense hope that they were wrong, that this was all a terrible mistake. When the phone call finally came, the room fell silent. The DNA from the napkin was a perfect, incontrovertible match to the hair from Sarah Linden's hand. The friendly, respected man they had been watching was the killer. This confirmation created a chilling new reality. The original theory of a random, violent intruder was completely dismantled. David Miller had a key. His company had done renovation work on the Linden home a year before the murders. He knew the family.
He had been inside their house.
This was not a random act. It was personal. The question of motive became an obsession. Why would a man with so much to lose commit such a brutal, senseless act? The investigation shifted from proving who to understanding why. Detectives began digging into David Miller's past, his business dealings, any possible connection to Michael Linden that went beyond a casual contractor-client relationship. They discovered that in the early 1990s, Miller's company was on shakier financial ground than anyone had realized. A quiet desperation lay beneath the surface of his success. The puzzle pieces of the crime scene were reassembled in this new, terrifying light. The lack of forced entry made sense. The absence of a random theft had a reason. The killer wasn't a stranger. He was a man they all knew, a man who had hidden in plain sight for 3 decades. His life, a carefully constructed monument to normality, built atop a foundation of horrific violence. Confronted with the irrefutable DNA evidence, David Miller's carefully constructed world collapsed with startling speed. There was no long, drawn-out interrogation. He seemed to understand that the science had finally caught up to him, leaving no room for lies. His confession was delivered in a flat, emotionless monotone, as if he were reciting facts from a business report. He revealed a motive far more mundane, and in its own way more terrifying than any theory the police had entertained. It was not a crime of passion or hidden obsession. It was about money and reputation. Years before the murders, David and Michael Linden had entered a quiet, private business partnership, investing in a piece of commercial land on the edge of town. Michael had discovered that David was skimming funds from their joint account, a slow, deliberate embezzlement to prop up his own struggling construction business. Michael, an honest and principled man, had confronted David and given him an ultimatum: come clean and repay the money within a week, or he would go to the authorities. For David, exposure meant not just financial ruin but a complete social collapse. The respect he craved and had worked so hard to build would evaporate overnight. That night he went to the Linden house under the guise of discussing a repayment plan. The conversation turned into a heated argument in the master bedroom, and in a blind rage David attacked Michael. When Sarah heard the commotion and entered the room, he had to silence her too. The final, heartbreaking piece of the puzzle was Emma. He confirmed he had taken her from the house not with the intention of killing her, but in a state of sheer panicked confusion. He claimed that as he drove, listening to her terrified whimpers from the back seat, his resolve broke. He couldn't do it. He led her out on the dark roadside, hoping the trauma would blur her memory forever. During a search of David's home, investigators found a small, tarnished silver locket tucked away in a box of old keepsakes. It was Emma's, a birthday gift from her parents. Inside were faded photographs of them. He had kept it all these years. When shown the locket, Emma, now a woman in her 40s, felt a memory break loose from the darkness of that night. It wasn't the violence she remembered. It was David Miller's face leaning over her, his expression not one of rage but of a strange, chilling calm as he told her everything was going to be all right, just before she lost consciousness. The DNA breakthrough had done more than just name a killer. It had unraveled a lifetime of lies, revealing that the most dangerous monster is not the stranger in the shadows, but the one who smiles at you from the sunlight. The conviction of David Miller brought a long-awaited, bittersweet closure to Oakwood Falls. The town was forced to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster he truly was. A chilling reminder that evil rarely announces itself with a snarl, but often with a smile. For Emma Linden, the verdict was not a celebration, but a release. The DNA breakthrough did not bring her parents back, but it gave her the one thing she had been denied for 3 decades: the truth. It silenced the haunting questions and replaced the shadow of a faceless stranger with the cold, hard reality of a betrayal from within her own community. The case stands as a powerful testament to the relentless pursuit of justice, where the smallest piece of evidence, preserved for decades, can finally speak with a voice that echoes louder than any lie. Science unlocked the past, giving a victim the power to finally lay her ghosts to rest.